The courtroom felt unnaturally quiet. It wasn't the usual silence that settled before Judge Judy walked in. It was heavier, almost suffocating. Like everyone already knew something was off. At the plaintiff's table sat a small, anxious figure who didn't seem like she belonged in a place like this. Emily Turner, only 14, sat with her hands tightly folded in her lap. Her shoulders were hunched inward, as if she wanted to shrink out of sight completely. Next to her, her mother Sarah looked exhausted, like sleep had avoided her for days. Her eyes kept shifting nervously between her daughter and the parking officer seated across the room, still struggling to accept that all of this, the courtroom, the cameras, the tension, had started because of him. On the opposite side sat Officer Daniel Price. His arms were folded confidently across his chest, his posture relaxed, almost arrogant. His face showed no concern, only indifference. To someone unaware of the situation, he looked like a man simply doing his duty. But to anyone who had read the case details, he seemed like someone who had forgotten the meaning of that duty. When his eyes met Sarah's, a faint smirk appeared on his lips. That small, careless expression sent a wave of unease through the room. Then the door behind the bench opened. Judge Judy entered with slow, steady steps, each one echoing just enough to deepen the tension. She placed her folder down but didn't open it right away. Instead, she studied both sides in silence, her gaze sharp and unbroken, before exhaling with clear irritation. It wasn't aimed at the child, nor at the mother. Her attention shifted straight to Officer Price. As she looked at him, still leaning back, still holding on to that smug expression, her face hardened. It was clear she had already seen something troubling in the file. But she held her words. Instead, she turned her focus to the young girl. "State your name," she said, her tone calm but firm, leaving no room for dishonesty. "Emily Turner," the girl replied softly. "How old are you?" 14. The word barely left Emily's mouth before Judy's jaw tightened slightly. 14, she repeated, as if the number itself carried weight. "All right, let's begin." Even before the facts were fully laid out, something felt deeply wrong. A child sitting in court over a ticket she didn't even understand. A mother overwhelmed by consequences that never should have escalated this far, and an officer whose decision had turned a simple situation into something far more serious. The tension in the room reflected the pressure Emily had been living under for weeks, quiet, building, and ready to break. But Judge Judy didn't rush. She stayed composed, controlled. She didn't even open the file yet. "Mrs. Turner," she said calmly, "why are you here today?" Sarah swallowed hard before speaking, her voice unsteady. "Your Honor, my daughter was given a parking ticket while she was waiting for me. She didn't break any rules. She wasn't driving, she was just sitting in the car, doing exactly what I told her." She paused, struggling to steady herself. "But that ticket, it caused more damage than you can imagine." At that moment, Judy leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped together on the bench. "A ticket issued to a child," she said quietly, glancing toward the officer. "Let's make something clear. A 14-year-old was in the driver's seat." "No, Your Honor," Emily answered quickly. "I was in the passenger seat. The car was off. I wasn't touching anything." "You were alone." "Les. Your mother told you to stay there." "Les. And you followed her instructions." "Yes." Short questions, clear answers. But the atmosphere had already shifted. Judge Judy had seen enough. She had read the citation, gone through the officer's report, and something in that paperwork had raised serious concerns. Enough to bring this case out of routine processing and into the spotlight. Finally, she opened the folder. For a moment, she didn't even look down. She stared at the stack of documents and spoke, her voice steady but firm. "This isn't about a ticket," she said. "It's about judgment." She paused, then added, "And from what I've seen so far, a 14-year-old was penalized for trying to stay safe, while an adult failed to apply basic common sense." Her gaze snapped back to Officer Price. "And I intend to find out exactly why." The room leaned in. Emily held her breath. Sarah gripped her daughter's hand tightly. And for the first time since the case began, the officer's confidence faltered, his smirk fading away. Everything was about to shift. To understand why Judge Judy reacted the way she did the moment she saw Emily in that courtroom, you have to go back to the night it all started. It wasn't chaotic or dramatic, nothing about it seemed unusual at first. Just a normal Tuesday evening that slowly turned into a situation no one expected. One of those moments where small decisions collide with the wrong authority at exactly the wrong time. Sarah Turner had already fallen behind schedule that day. Her shift at the diner ran late because a coworker didn't show up, leaving her to handle everything until the last tables were cleared and the register was balanced. By the time she finally clocked out, the sky had gone dark. The cold November air had settled in, cutting through thin clothing and exhausted bones. Emily sat quietly in the passenger seat, working on her homework under the dim light of the dashboard, doing her best not to show how tired she really was. Both she and her mother were exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that comes from living one paycheck at a time. But before heading home, they had one last stop to make: the grocery store. Sarah only needed a couple of things: milk and something for her headache. It should have been quick and simple, but she knew if she skipped it, the next morning would be a struggle. No milk for Emily's breakfast. No relief for the constant ache in her head. No strength for another long day she was already dreading. When they arrived, the parking lot was packed. Delivery trucks took up several spaces, and the rest were filled with evening shoppers. Sarah drove around twice, hoping to find something closer so Emily wouldn't have to step out into the cold. But nothing opened up. She checked the time. There was still homework, laundry, and dishes waiting at home, so she made a quick decision. "Stay here, sweetheart," she said softly. "It'll be quicker this way. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone. I'll be right back." This wasn't unusual for them. Emily didn't like going into crowded stores at night, especially when she was already drained. Sarah always believed it was safer for her to remain in the locked car than to wander through a busy store alone. It was one of those habits built from both caution and care, something many single parents rely on. But over the following weeks, everything started to unravel. Sarah couldn't pay the ticket right away, and that led to a late fee. Then came an additional processing charge. Soon after, her bank account overdrafted when one of the payments hit earlier than expected, triggering yet another penalty. By the time it all settled, the original $150 fine had grown into more than $300. Emily heard it all: every frustrated sigh, every quiet complaint, every late-night moment with a calculator as her mother tried to figure things out. She watched the stress slowly wear her mother down, and the guilt began to take over. She kept apologizing for something that wasn't even her fault. At school, she became distant. She stopped talking to her friends. She gave up the things she once enjoyed. No more drawing, no more laughter, no more signs of the carefree child she used to be. The night Sarah found her crying under the blanket, whispering, "I ruined everything," was the breaking point. That's when she knew this couldn't continue. She wasn't going to let her daughter carry the burden of a mistake that wasn't hers. So when a coworker overheard her on the phone and said, "You should take this to someone who actually uses common sense, send it to Judge Judy," Sarah didn't brush it off this time. She sent everything. The ticket, the denied appeals, the explanations, even photos of the curb and the barely visible sign. And when the call came from the show's producers saying they wanted the case, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. What Sarah and Emily didn't realize when they walked into the courtroom was that the file sitting in front of Judge Judy wasn't exactly the same one they had submitted. While they had been waiting anxiously for their hearing, Judy's team had been working quietly behind the scenes, checking records, reviewing local regulations, and digging into citation histories that Sarah, juggling multiple responsibilities, would never have had time to investigate, because Judy wasn't just processing paperwork, she was analyzing it. She had spent years spotting inconsistencies in stories that didn't quite make sense, and from the moment this case crossed her desk, she knew something wasn't just off, it was deeply wrong. As soon as Sarah finished speaking, the shift in the courtroom was subtle but undeniable. Judy's expression tightened slightly. Her fingers tapped once against the file, and when she finally addressed Officer Price, her tone carried a quiet intensity. "Officer Price," she said evenly, "I have a few questions." He straightened up, trying to maintain the confident posture he had walked in with. Shoulders back, chin raised. The stance of someone used to being in control. But there was a brief flicker in his eyes when he realized she wasn't just skimming his report. She was examining everything. Judy pulled a document from the file, marked with tabs. "This is the citation you issued to Emily Turner," she said. "According to your report, the driver refused to move the vehicle. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," he replied with a nod. "And you stand by that statement?" "Yes." Judy leaned forward slightly. "The driver you're referring to was 14 years old." There was a pause, brief but noticeable. Yes," he answered. "I mean, the person in the car refused to move." "The person in that car was a child," Judy said sharply, her voice cutting through the room. "A child who legally isn't even allowed to drive. A child who couldn't have moved that vehicle even if she wanted to. And yet you recorded her refusal, as if she were an adult making a conscious decision." He tried to defend himself. "Your Honor, the law doesn't mention age. A vehicle can't remain in a no-standing zone." The Judy looked at him, steady, cold, unblinking. The silence that followed felt suffocating, like the entire room had been drained of air. "Officer Price," she said at last, "I'm going to give you a chance to correct your statement. Because either you didn't understand what you were writing, or you knowingly falsified part of this citation to avoid admitting you ticketed a minor. Which is it?" His jaw tightened. "I followed protocol." "Yes," Judy replied sharply, the favorite excuse of people who stop using their judgment. She turned another page. "Your protocol also seems to include using nearly identical wording on 32 separate citations in this same area over the past 3 months." She lifted several sheets. These were all written within time gaps so short that some appear less than 30 seconds apart. "Can you explain how you approached each car, assessed the situation, spoke to the driver, and documented a refusal all in under a minute?" A quiet murmur spread across the courtroom. Officer Price's face reddened. "I'm efficient, Your Honor." Judy let out a short, sharp laugh, one filled with disbelief, not humor. "Efficient?" she said. "That's one way to describe it. Reckless, careless, or incompetent might be more accurate. Take your pick." She tapped the papers firmly. "What I see here is a pattern. A pattern of issuing as many tickets as possible in a high-traffic area without actually engaging with the people involved. And in this case, that pattern crossed a very serious line." Emily lowered her gaze, her shoulders tense. Even as Judy spoke in her defense, the memory of that night still weighed heavily on her. But Judy wasn't done. She turned toward Sarah. "Mrs. Turner, how long were you inside the store?" 7 minutes, Sarah answered, steadying her voice. "I checked the receipt. I only bought milk and headache medicine. The car was off the entire time, and your daughter, 14 years old, was alone, doing exactly what you told her." "Less." Judy snapped the file shut. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a crack. "Officer Price," she said, her voice low but cutting. "You issued a ticket to a child. You documented her as a driver. You failed to note she was a minor, alone in a locked car. You wrote this as if you were dealing with an adult who refused to comply, when in reality, you were confronting a frightened girl who didn't even know if she should open the door." He tried to respond, his mouth opening, then closing, but no words came out. "You didn't follow protocol," Judy continued. "You didn't apply basic judgment, and you certainly didn't act with decency." The room fell completely still. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. Emily slowly lifted her head, looking at Judge Judy for the first time. Not with fear, but with a small, fragile sense of hope. And Officer Price, the man who had entered with confidence, now seemed to shrink under the weight of what was being exposed. But Judy wasn't finished yet. The tension in the courtroom grew heavier, like something was about to break. Price shifted in his seat, holding on to whatever authority he thought he still had. Emily sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly, trembling. Sarah leaned forward slightly, bracing herself. No one was prepared for what came next, because until now, Judy had only been addressing the surface. She opened the file again, but this time, instead of citations or regulations, she pulled out something else, something far more serious. A document stamped in bold lettering, "Internal Affairs." The moment Officer Price saw it, the color drained from his face. "Officer Price," Judy said, her tone calm but sharp, "did you assume I only had your citation report to review when you walked into this courtroom?" He swallowed. I followed the law, Your Honor. Excellent, she replied, her voice laced with sarcasm. Then this should be very easy for you to explain. She held up a page. Are you familiar with complaint number 427B involving you and a citation issued to a single mother last month? He flinched slightly. That matter was unresolved. Unresolved, Judy repeated, her expression tightening. That's one way to put it. Another would be ignored. A heavy silence settled across the room. According to this report, she continued, tapping the document, you issued a 3D25 ticket to a disabled woman who was unloading groceries. She had a valid disability placard, something you claim you didn't see. She paused briefly. That case was flagged for another reason as well. Her eyes locked onto his. Your body camera was conveniently turned off. She leaned forward slightly, her tone sharpening, mirroring the seriousness of that night when Emily Turner was given the ticket. Another wave of shock moved through the courtroom. Officer Price stood speechless, but Judy continued without pause. And this, she said, lifting another document, is complaint number 32C. She glanced down briefly before continuing, a delivery driver. You issued him a no-standing violation while he was on the ground next to his truck after collapsing from heat exhaustion. That complaint did not end in your favor either. Sarah covered her mouth in disbelief. Emily's eyes widened. And there's more, Judy added, her voice growing firmer with each word. Complaint number 301, a pregnant woman in her third trimester. You cited her after she pulled over because she felt dizzy. Judy's gaze locked onto him. She was taken away in an ambulance. Do you remember that case, Officer Price? He stared forward, his jaw slack, beads of sweat forming along his temples. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone could feel the moment unraveling. Judy carefully placed the papers down, then spoke with precision and finality. You have a pattern, Officer Price. A clear pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals, women, children, the elderly, the disabled. She paused briefly. A pattern of choosing those you believed wouldn't push back. A pattern of writing tickets first and asking questions later. Then she turned toward Emily. And this child, Judy said, her voice softening though the intensity remained, was simply your next easy target. Emily swallowed, her eyes filling with tears. Judy shifted her attention to Sarah. Mrs. Turner, what financial impact did this citation have on you? Sarah clasped her hands tightly. Your Honor, I couldn't afford it. I worked 2 jobs. I was already behind on rent. With the added penalties, it became $382. She took a breath. That's almost a week's worth of groceries for us. Judy's expression hardened again. A 14-year-old girl caused none of this, she said firmly. What caused this was careless enforcement by someone who forgot that a badge is meant for responsibility, not intimidation. Then came the ruling. This court declares the citation invalid. All associated fees are dismissed, and the officer's conduct is unacceptable. Gasps echoed across the room, but Judy wasn't done. Officer Price, I am forwarding this case, along with these prior complaints, to Internal Affairs with a recommendation for a full review of your actions. His composure finally broke. Your Honor, please. No. Judy cut in sharply. You don't get to ask for leniency now. You chose authority over fairness. You chose intimidation over duty. And you chose a 14-year-old child as your target. Her voice rose with controlled force. Actions have consequences. Emily let out a choked sob as Sarah pulled her into a tight embrace. Then Judy turned back to them, her tone completely different now, gentle, reassuring. Emily, she said softly, you did nothing wrong. Do you understand? Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. This was not your fault. It was the kind of sentence that stays with someone for the rest of their life. The entire courtroom seemed to release a breath at once. Sarah whispered through tears, thank you so much. Judy gave a small nod. Chase dismissed. The gavel struck once, loud and final, and then something unexpected happened. The audience, usually silent until filming ended, rose to their feet almost instinctively. A standing ovation, for a frightened young girl, for a mother who refused to give up, and above all, for justice. Emily buried her face into her mother's shoulder, overwhelmed. Sarah kept mouthing, thank you, again and again. As for Judge Judy, she didn't smile or acknowledge the applause. She simply leaned back, calm and composed, with the quiet certainty of someone who had fulfilled her purpose. standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves.